We were sitting on the porch, 2 glasses of wine, the sky dimming into that soft, lonely blue only men over 50 truly understand. And then she said it. I don't need a man to protect me. I need a man whose silence doesn't feel like absence. That stopped me cold, because for a long time I was absent even when I was right there. Let me ask you something. Have you ever sat next to a woman and still felt alone? Have you ever given her everything, a home, loyalty, your years, and yet sensed deep down she couldn't feel you anymore? Have you ever wondered why women walk away from good men without drama, without cruelty, just a silent retreat? And worst of all, have you ever stared at your own reflection and thought, what happened to the man I used to be? You see, after 50, the rules of attraction change. It's no longer about charm or performance. It's about presence, about emotional depth, about spiritual maturity. Carl Jung called this the journey of individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole. And the truth is, women feel it. They may not know the word for it, but they know when you've done your work. They feel it in your calm, in the way your eyes don't dart around the room, in the way you listen, not to reply, but to receive. Attraction after 50 isn't about being impressive. It's about being spiritually felt. And if you've ever felt like your stillness was mistaken for absence, this story might help you reclaim the part of you that was never gone, just hidden. Let me take you back to the moment I realized I was losing her. Not because I failed, but because I wasn't fully there. This is how you lose her, even when you do everything right. That was the first thing John ever said to me when we met at a men's retreat in Colorado. He wasn't angry. He wasn't dramatic. Just confused, quietly broken. Like a man who still couldn't make the math add up. 25 years. That's how long he'd been married. 2 adult kids. Mortgage paid. No cheating. No screaming matches. Just doing the right thing. Every single day. I came home every night. I paid every bill. I never touched another woman, he said, but she still left. Not all at once. First she stopped laughing. Then she stopped sitting next to him on the couch. Then one day, same kitchen table, same mug, same toast. She looked across the table and said, John, I don't feel anything when I'm around you anymore. He told me it felt like a vacuum opened in his chest, not because it was loud, but because it was final. After the divorce, John did what many of us would do. He hit the gym, bought a motorcycle, tried online dating, told himself he just needed to get back out there, but something had shifted. No matter what I said or wore or did, I felt like a hollow man trying to look full, he said. Women saw the smile, but not the man behind it. Then he met Claire. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't 20 years younger. She was aware, present. She looked at him like she saw the parts of him he had forgotten. One night, while they watched a jazz concert playing, softly on her TV, Claire turned to him and whispered, You have this quiet inside you, like you've stopped trying to prove anything. He didn't answer. He just exhaled, and she placed her hand gently on his chest and said, I feel safe here. That was it. Not passion, not fireworks, but something deeper. A woman feeling held, not by arms, but by presence. He had stopped performing and started being. That night, after Claire had fallen asleep on the couch beside him, John looked at his reflection in the dark window for the first time since the divorce. He didn't feel invisible. And if you've ever felt that too, like you were doing everything right and still weren't seen, just know this, you're not alone. Have you ever been there? Drop a comment. Not for me, but for the man who needs to know he's not the only one. And maybe you felt it too, not just in your marriage, but with your children. Your daughter stops calling. Your son replies with one-word texts. The people you love most. Somehow stopped feeling you were really there, not because you weren't trying, but because you were taught to be silent instead of present. You don't need to have it all together. You don't need the perfect words, because men don't need to be perfect, just as present. And what Claire felt that night, that quiet safety, wasn't random. There's a name for that presence, that stillness, and why it reaches so deep into a woman's nervous system. Let's talk about that. What Claire felt that night was not charisma, not charm. It was something far quieter, far older, something Carl Jung would have called integration. But to understand that moment fully, we need to start with something more familiar, something that happens in living rooms, kitchens, and long silences between couples who once knew how to reach each other. Dr. John Gottman, one of the most respected researchers on long-term relationships, discovered that the greatest predictor of lasting love isn't passion, shared hobbies, or physical attraction. It's something deeper, emotional attunement. That means being emotionally present with your partner, not solving, not rescuing, not minimizing, but simply being there, fully, feeling with them, breathing with them, letting their emotion exist without rushing to change it. And this is where many men, especially those of us over 50, quietly fall apart. Not because we don't care, but because we were never shown another way. From a young age, we're taught to fix, to provide, to push through. We develop reflexes built on usefulness, not tenderness. So when the woman we love breaks down crying, we offer solutions. When she's overwhelmed, we bring logic. And when she pulls away, we give space, believing it's respectful. But to her, it feels like abandonment. And slowly, quietly, she stops reaching for us. Not because we did something wrong, but because we stopped letting her feel our presence. That's what happened to John. His wife didn't leave because he cheated or failed. She left because she couldn't feel him anymore. And if Gottman reveals the behavior, Carl Jung reveals the soul beneath it. According to Jung, every man carries within him a kind of inner architecture, two great forces that shape how we relate to ourselves and to those we love. The first is the shadow, the parts of ourselves we repress or deny, the shame, the fear, the moments we were told we were weak or too much. These are the ghosts we bury, but they never stay buried. They show up in our defensiveness, our silence, our disconnection. The second is the anima, the feminine energy that lives in every man. It's the source of our emotional intuition, the part of us that knows how to feel beauty, how to hold space, how to love softly. It's not weakness, it's depth. But most men, especially those raised to be strong, reject both. They lock away the shadow, they silence the anima, and they build lives that look solid on the outside. Careers, cars, calendars, control, but feel hollow on the inside. Women don't fall for that outer structure, they fall for the soul inside the structure. And when they don't feel that soul, when they sense you've gone missing from yourself, they start to slip away too. But here's the turning point. When a man begins to integrate his shadow, meaning he stops running from pain, regret, or weakness, he becomes grounded. He doesn't react from insecurity. He doesn't posture, doesn't puff up. He simply is. And when he also reclaims his Anima, when he allows himself to feel, to connect, to soften without shame, he becomes magnetic in a way that no cologne, no gym membership, no bank account ever could replicate. That's the quiet power Claire felt in John. Not dominance, not seduction, but wholeness. A man who had stopped pretending, a man who had met his pain and didn't fear hers. And when a woman senses that kind of presence, something happens, something primal. She exhales. She doesn't analyze it. She simply feels it, like a body remembering what safety feels like. That's when she says things like, "I feel like I can breathe around him." Or she might tell her, "Friends, He doesn't try to fix me. He just listens, and I feel seen. Or she might simply sit beside you in silence and whisper, "You make me feel grounded." Those aren't compliments, they're confirmations that your presence is safe because it's real. Jung called this the journey of individuation. Not self-improvement, but self-integration. Not trying to become something new, but becoming whole with what's already inside you. And when a man reaches that point, when he stops performing and starts being, a woman doesn't fall in love with what he says or what he has. She falls in love with the space he creates simply by existing, and, maybe for the first time in years, he falls in love with that space too. So if you're wondering how to access that stillness, how to move from performing to presence, you don't need a script. What you need is practice. Let me show you what John did next. You see, John didn't become grounded overnight. There wasn't a single moment of enlightenment, no retreat, no grand awakening. It was slower, quieter, the way stones smooth beneath a river. After years of trying to win women back with charm, gestures, or being a good guy, he did something radically different. He stopped performing. He stopped trying to be impressive, stopped telling stories that made him look wise, stopped pretending to know what he didn't feel, and instead, he chose to stay. The next time he went on a date with a woman named Melissa, something shifted. She was talking about her late husband, and at one point her voice cracked. John's old instincts rose up fast. Say something comforting. Offer a solution. Make her laugh. But this time he did none of that. He leaned in gently, made eye contact, and said, "That sounds like it still hurts. You don't have to rush past it." And then he shut up. He stayed there, in the discomfort. Not rushing it, not fixing it, just being with her fully, as she cried quietly. That was it. No profound insight, no poetic line, just presence. And afterward, she looked at him with soft eyes and said, "That's the first time I've talked about him without feeling like I had to protect someone else." This is the practice of emotional presence. It's not mystical. It's about staying emotionally anchored while another person moves through their storm. It means letting go of your reflex to control, comfort or avoid, and instead choosing to feel with, not around. For John, that began to bleed into other parts of his life. He started walking slower, breathing deeper. When his adult son called to talk about work stress, he didn't interrupt with advice. He just asked, "Do you want me to listen or help?" That single question changed their relationship. Presence became his practice, not a trick to get women, but a way of being a man who could hold space without disappearing inside it. And you want to know the most beautiful part? He told me this one evening over coffee. "When I finally stopped trying to be interesting, people started leaning in. They felt me because I was finally there." That's the paradox. Most men think attraction is something we create by doing more, but real attraction, the kind that pulls a woman in without a word, comes from doing less but meaning it more. You don't need a script. You don't need clever comebacks or high-status stories. You need to be there, truly there, with all of you, not just the polished parts. And the only way to hold space for someone else is to first stop running from your own. So what happens when a man lives like that? Not in performance, but in presence. Not in reaction, but in rootedness. What awakens in him? When he finally stops chasing connection and starts embodying. It lets step into that final space, the space where Carl Jung would say the soul begins to speak. There comes a moment in a man's life, especially after 50, when he stops asking, "What do women want?" and begins asking something far more important. Who am I when I'm no longer performing? For most of us, the first half of life is spent constructing a career, a name, a family, and also quietly, a persona, that mask we wear to be accepted, admired, desired. But as Jung taught, the second half of life isn't about building, it's about returning. returning to what's been buried, returning to what's been rejected, and, if we're brave enough, returning to who we actually are beneath the armor. This is the shadow work, to sit with the version of you that was once shamed for feeling too much, the boy who cried and was told, "Man up," the teenager who was laughed at for writing poetry, the young husband who felt lonely in bed but didn't dare admit it. These fragments don't die, they wait, and one day, usually when your old ways stop working, they start whispering again. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." What John discovered, and what I've come to understand through my own scars, is that healing doesn't happen through effort. It happens through honest attention, noticing when you want to withdraw, and choosing to stay, noticing when anger rises, and asking, what is this really protecting? Noticing when a woman opens up, and resisting the urge to fix her, and in those choices, small, quiet, private, you begin the journey not toward being a better man, but toward becoming a whole one. And here's the mystery, as you do this work, something in you softens, but something else strengthens. Your voice becomes deeper, not in pitch, but in truth. Your gaze becomes steadier. You begin to feel emotions without drowning in them. You walk into a room, and though you say little, people feel something different, not dominance, not intimidation, but depth. That's the energy of the integrated man. He's not loud, but he's unforgettable. He's not perfect, but he's present. The man who has faced his shadow and invited it to sit beside him. The man who no longer fears the feminine within, but lets it inform how he listens, how he nurtures, how he loves. That man doesn't chase women. He doesn't try to be safe. He simply is. And women feel it, because deep calls to deep, and spiritual attraction isn't about perfection. It's about resonance. So if you've ever felt that you were too broken, too tired, too late, know this. The journey doesn't start when you find the right woman. It starts when you finally turn inward and say, "I'm ready to meet the man I left behind." And that man, the real you, has been waiting patiently just behind the noise. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know all the answers, and you definitely don't have to pretend anymore. Because the truth is, most of us weren't taught how to be here, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. But that changes now, not by shouting louder, not by trying harder, but by becoming still enough to finally be felt. So I want to ask you, not as an expert, not as a coach, but as another man walking this same quiet path, have you ever felt invisible, even when you did everything right? Have you ever loved someone deeply, but still lost them because you didn't know how to stay present with their pain, or your own? And deeper still, have you ever felt like a ghost in your own home? Like you were there, but no one could feel you anymore? Like your daughter walked past you but didn't look up? Like your son shared more with his phone than with you? If that's you, I invite you to leave a comment below. Not a lecture, not a life story, just a line, a signal to the others who are still silent. Something like, "I'm learning to be present, not perfect," or "I'm not hiding anymore." Because sometimes one honest sentence from you can remind another man that he's not alone, and maybe, just maybe, help him begin his own return.